The rain had just stopped when Claire Evans stood by the kitchen window, watching the gray Seattle sky fade into a faint orange glow. It was one of those evenings that felt ordinary, yet strangely heavy. Her husband, Daniel, was late again. He had texted her 2 hours ago, running behind. Big project meeting. That message had become too familiar lately. Claire placed 2 plates on the dining table, then hesitated. She had gotten used to eating alone, pretending not to mind. When Daniel finally walked in, his face looked worn from another long day. He loosened his tie and smiled faintly. "Hey, sorry I'm late. We've got a new project lead transferring from New York. Her name's Olivia. She's sharp, energetic, a real asset to the team." His tone carried excitement, something Claire hadn't heard from him in a while. She smiled and nodded, pretending to share his enthusiasm. "That's great," she said softly. But inside, she felt a tiny pinch of unease. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was the way his eyes lit up when he talked about someone new. In the following days, Daniel's schedule grew tighter. Early meetings, late dinners, work calls at midnight. Claire had lived with his busy career for years, but this time something felt different. She began to notice how often Olivia's name appeared in conversation, in casual remarks, in work stories, even in small jokes. Daniel repeated at home. "Olivia handled the client like a pro today," he'd say. Or "Olivia had this great idea for the pitch." Claire told herself it was harmless. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something in their marriage had started to drift. One Friday evening, Daniel mentioned that his office was hosting a small celebration to welcome Olivia officially. "You should come," he said. "It'll be nice to meet everyone," Claire agreed, though part of her hesitated. She spent the afternoon choosing a navy blue dress, elegant but simple. As she looked in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "It's just an office party, nothing more." The event was held in a cozy downtown restaurant filled with laughter and chatter. When Claire arrived, Daniel greeted her with a warm smile, wrapping his arm gently around her shoulders. "There you are. Claire, meet Olivia." The woman standing before her was striking, tall, confident, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a calm, charming smile. She reached out to shake Claire's hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Daniel's told me you're an interior designer. I'd love to see your work sometime." Her voice was friendly, genuine even. But something in her eyes made Claire uneasy, a kind of closeness she couldn't quite define. Olivia and Daniel exchanged a brief glance, almost unnoticeable. But Claire saw it. It was quick, familiar, and it left her with a strange emptiness in her chest. Throughout the evening, Claire tried to blend in, chatting with other team members, smiling politely, laughing when expected. But every time she glanced across the room, Daniel and Olivia seemed to be in their own quiet world, talking easily, laughing naturally, as though they had known each other for years. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was too comfortable. To natural dot, when they drove home that night, Claire kept her gaze fixed on the passing streetlights. "She seems nice," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "Yeah, she's great. Really knows her stuff. She's been a huge help these past few weeks." Claire nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. A huge help. The words echoed in her thoughts. She wanted to believe it was all professional, that Daniel was simply impressed by Olivia's work. But deep down, she sensed something shifting. Not necessarily a betrayal, but a slow, quiet pull of attention away from her. The next morning, Claire woke up to find Daniel already gone. A note on the counter. "Early meeting. Back late." She made her coffee and opened her laptop, trying to focus on her design project. Yet no matter how she tried, her thoughts kept returning to that glance. That soft laugh between Daniel and Olivia. By mid-afternoon, she decided to stop by Daniel's office. It wasn't planned. She simply missed him and wanted to surprise him with lunch. She packed his favorite sandwich, drove downtown, and walked into the modern glass building that always felt too cold. "It's a professional." The receptionist smiled politely and called Daniel's floor. A few minutes later, Claire heard a familiar voice behind her. "Claire, what a surprise." It was Olivia. She was holding a coffee cup, her tone bright but slightly nervous. "Daniel's in a meeting," she said. "But I can let him know you're here." "Oh, that's fine," Claire replied with a gentle smile. "I just brought him lunch." For a brief moment, their eyes met two women connected by one man, both aware, both measuring each other in silence. Olivia's friendliness didn't fade, but there was something cautious behind it. She hesitated before saying, "You're thoughtful. Daniel's lucky to have you." "Thank you," Claire said softly. "He's a good man." Olivia nodded, but her expression tightened just slightly before she excused herself. As Claire left the building, her heart pounded faster than she wanted to admit. There was nothing concrete, no real reason to worry, yet her instincts screamed that something was quietly changing. That night, Daniel came home exhausted. "Sorry I didn't call," he said, kissing her on the forehead. The presentation went long. Claire smiled faintly and placed the leftover food on the table. "It's okay," she replied. But her eyes studied him, the slight tension in his shoulders, the distracted look when his phone buzzed, the way he quickly turned it face down, later while folding laundry. Claire saw his phone light up on the nightstand. The message preview was brief. "Olivia, great job today. You made it look easy." Claire froze for a moment. It was a simple message, but it carried weight. She didn't feel anger, just a deep ache. It wasn't that Daniel had done something wrong, it was that someone else was beginning to see the best parts of him. The parts that once belonged only to her. When Daniel came to bed, he wrapped his arm around her. "You okay?" he asked softly. She forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." But she wasn't tired, she was quietly afraid. Afraid of losing something without even realizing it was slipping away. As she lay awake beside him, she wondered when love started to fade, not through arguments or distance, but through small moments, unnoticed gestures, and the warmth of someone new stepping too close. That night, the city outside whispered through the rain, and Claire understood something she hadn't wanted to admit. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins with silence, with laughter shared a little too often, and with a glance that lingers just a second too long. And though nothing had truly happened yet, Claire could already feel it, the fragile edge of a story that was about to change everything. Days turned into weeks, and Claire could feel the distance between her and Daniel growing like a quiet wall neither of them mentioned. He was still kind, still polite, still her husband, but something about his energy had changed. He seemed distracted even when he was home. His phone was always close, his smiles were shorter, and his laughter, the one she used to hear over dinner, now belonged somewhere else. Every conversation about work somehow included Olivia's name. Olivia came up with this clever pitch. He'd say, "Olivia's helping me with the client proposal," or "Olivia and I are staying late to finish the reports." At first, Claire listened patiently, forcing herself to smile, but deep down, each mention stung a little more. It wasn't jealousy that hurt her, it was the realization that her husband sounded more alive when he talked about another woman than when he talked to her one Wednesday evening. Daniel walked in late again. He looked tired but strangely satisfied. "We nailed the presentation," he said with a small grin. "Olivia really pulled it together." Claire congratulated him, but inside something twisted. She noticed the way he mentioned Olivia's name, not as a colleague, but as a partner in something that seemed bigger than work. That night, while Daniel was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the counter. Claire wasn't the kind of woman who went through her husband's phone, but curiosity overcame hesitation. She glanced at the screen. It was a text from Olivia. "Thanks for tonight. Couldn't have done it without you. You always make things easier." Her heart sank. There was nothing inappropriate in the message, but it carried a warmth that didn't belong in a professional space. She locked the phone again, her hands trembling slightly. When Daniel came out, she smiled faintly and said nothing. But as she lay beside him that night, the silence between them spoke louder than words. The next day, Claire tried to distract herself with work. She met a client, redesigned a living room, and even went out for coffee with a friend. But no matter what she did, her thoughts drifted back to that message. "You always make things easier." Those words echoed like a whisper she couldn't unhear. By evening, she couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. She decided to visit Daniel at his office, unannounced, spontaneous. She wanted to see for herself, to understand what kind of closeness existed between him and Olivia. The office was bright and modern, with glass walls and busy faces. Claire brought a small lunch bag and walked to the reception desk. "I'm here to see Daniel Evans," she said with a calm smile. The receptionist nodded and called upstairs. A moment later, Olivia appeared from the elevator. "Oh, Claire." "What a surprise," Olivia said, smiling. Her tone was warm, but Claire caught a flicker of something else. Maybe nervousness, maybe guilt. "Daniel's in a meeting right now," she continued. "I can tell him you're here if you'd like." "That's okay," Claire replied. "I just wanted to drop this off." "Okay," she handed her the bag. Their fingers brushed briefly, and in that brief touch, Claire felt an unspoken understanding pass between them, a silent acknowledgement that both women knew something wasn't as simple as it seemed. "You're very thoughtful," Olivia said softly. "Daniel's lucky to have you." The words sounded kind, but there was a small tremor behind them, like they carried weight. Claire smiled politely. "Thank you. I think so too." She turned to leave, keeping her expression calm even as her heart raced. That evening, Daniel called her on his way home. "Thanks for bringing lunch," he said. "Olivia mentioned you stopped by." His tone was casual, but Claire could sense that he knew why she had come. "I just missed you," she said gently. There was a pause. Then he replied, "I missed you too." But the warmth didn't reach his voice. Over the next week, things only became more confusing. Daniel seemed to avoid long conversations, burying himself in work. When he was home, he scrolled through his phone more often, smiling at messages he didn't share. Claire didn't confront him, not yet. She wanted to believe there was still trust between them. But deep down, she feared she was already losing him. Not to betrayal, but to emotional distance. One night, Daniel mentioned that his team was going on a short weekend retreat for team building. Claire asked who was going. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Just the usual group. Olivia will be there too." Something inside her broke a little, but she simply nodded. "That sounds nice," she said, forcing a smile. That weekend she stayed home, trying not to imagine what was happening. She watched old movies, cooked her favorite meal, and even lit a candle just to fill the silence. But no matter how hard she tried to keep busy, her heart fell heavier with every passing hour. When Daniel returned Sunday night, he looked relaxed, even cheerful. "The trip went well," he said, placing his bag down. "It was good for the team." Claire noticed a faint trace of perfume on his jacket, one that wasn't hers. It wasn't strong, but it lingered, delicate and unfamiliar. She didn't say a word. She just smiled and asked, "Dinner?" "Yes, please," he said, sitting at the table like nothing was wrong. Later that night, when he fell asleep, Claire sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street below. She tried to make sense of what was happening. Was she overthinking it? Or was this the slow unraveling of the life they had built together? The next morning, she looked at their wedding photo on the dresser, Daniel in his navy suit, her in a simple white dress, both smiling with pure joy. She touched the frame gently. "What happened to us?" she whispered. That afternoon, she called her friend Mia, the one person she trusted with her heart. "Something's different," Claire said. "He's not the same. I can feel it." Mia listened quietly and then said, "If you really think something's wrong, don't stay silent. Talk to him. But don't accuse, ask. Find the truth with calm, not anger." Claire nodded, though she wasn't sure she had the strength yet. That evening, when Daniel came home, she watched him closely. His smile, his small talk, his tired eyes, they all looked normal. Yet she could see the distance in the way he avoided her gaze. She realized the worst part wasn't fear or anger, it was loneliness. The kind that comes from sharing a house with someone who's no longer fully there. As she turned off the lights and lay down, she made a quiet promise to herself. If the truth was hiding somewhere in his silence, she would find it. She didn't know what she would discover or how much it would hurt. But she knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The lines between friendship and something deeper had already started to blur. And in her heart, Claire knew once that line fades, it's hard to draw it back again. The first heavy rain of December fell over Seattle like a gray curtain, washing the streets clean but clouding Claire's thoughts even more. She sat in her car outside Daniel's office, hands resting on the steering wheel, unsure whether she was there to surprise her husband or to face a truth she already feared. It was late, almost 7 in the evening, and Daniel had said he'd be working late again. She had brought dinner for him, hoping maybe the small gesture would remind him that someone at home still cared. Through the misted windshield, she could see the glass doors of the office building glowing under the streetlights. People came and went, umbrellas opening and closing like black wings. Then her breath caught. There he was, Daniel, stepping out with Olivia beside him, both sharing a single umbrella. They were talking and laughing, close enough that their shoulders brushed as they walked. It wasn't dramatic or scandalous, but it was too intimate, too easy. Claire's heart thudded painfully. She wanted to believe it was innocent, just colleagues leaving together. But as they stopped near the cafe across the street, saw Olivia touch Daniel's arm lightly, the way one does when there's comfort, maybe even affection. Daniel didn't pull away. For a moment, they just stood there, lost in quiet conversation. As the world blurred behind the rain, when Daniel finally noticed her car, his face changed. It was quick, a flicker of shock, but it told her everything. He said something to Olivia, nodded, and walked over. Claire rolled down the window halfway. "Claire," he said, his voice uneasy. "What are you doing here?" "I brought dinner," she replied softly, lifting the paper bag from the seat beside her. "You said you were working late." He looked down, guilt flickering across his expression. We just finished." Olivia was heading to her car, and it was raining. She cut him off gently. "You don't have to explain, Daniel. I saw enough." For a few seconds, they just stared at each other through the drizzle. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness, a quiet, heavy disappointment that hurt more than shouting ever could. At home, the silence felt unbearable. The sound of rain against the windows filled every corner of the room. Claire went to the kitchen, setting the untouched dinner on the counter. Daniel followed her in, his voice low. "Claire, please. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she said, turning to face him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've forgotten I exist." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Olivia's been going through a tough time. She's new here, struggling with the transition. I was just helping her adjust." "That's all, helping?" Claire asked quietly. "By spending every evening with her. By laughing with her the way you used to laugh with me." Daniel's shoulders dropped. "It's not like that." "But it feels like that," she whispered. "You don't even look at me the same anymore." Her words hung in the air, heavy and real. Daniel didn't deny it, and that silence told her what she needed to know. Maybe he hadn't crossed a physical line, but emotionally he was halfway gone. That night, Claire slept facing the wall. Daniel tried to reach for her once, but she stayed still, her eyes open in the dark. She had never felt so close to someone and so far at the same time. The next morning, she got up early and drove to the park where they used to walk on Sundays. She sat on a wet bench under her umbrella, watching the world move quietly around her. Memories flooded back. Their first date, their first apartment, the way Daniel used to bring her coffee in bed on weekends. All of it felt distant now, like scenes from another life. When she returned home, Danya was sitting at the kitchen table, looking tired and unsure. "I didn't mean for things to get this way," he said softly. "I've just been under pressure. Olivia listens, that's all. She understands the stress at work." Claire looked at him, her voice calm but trembling. "You used to talk to me about everything. You stopped doing that long before Olivia showed up." Daniel said nothing. He wanted to argue, to explain, but he knew she was right. Somewhere along the line, he had stopped turning to his wife for comfort and started finding it elsewhere, even if unintentionally. That evening, he left for another late meeting, promising it wouldn't be long. Claire didn't ask where he was really going. She just watched the rain streak down the window and thought about how love could fade so quietly, not in a fight, but in the space between unspoken words. 2 days later, Claire went to a cafe downtown for a client meeting. As she waited by the window, she saw Olivia sitting alone at a table across the street, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Something about her posture looked uncertain, maybe even sad. Claire hesitated, then walked over. Olivia looked surprised when she approached. "Claire," she said, standing up quickly. "Hi. I didn't expect. It's fine," Claire interrupted gently. "I just wanted to talk for a minute." She sat down, keeping her tone steady. "I know there's something between you and Daniel. I'm not here to fight. I just want the truth." Olivia's expression softened. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "Daniel is a good man. I think he's been lost lately. We've spent time together, yes, maybe too much, but it wasn't planned. It just happened." Claire looked down, her throat tight. "Did you ever think about what that would do to his marriage?" Olivia's eyes glistened. "Every day. And I hate that it's come to this. But sometimes when someone listens to you, you forget where the line is until it's already crossed." There was honesty in her voice, and that honesty hurt more than lies ever could. Claire nodded slowly, standing up. "Then maybe it's time we both remind him where that line belongs." That evening, when Daniel came home, the weight in his eyes told her that Olivia had already spoken to him. He didn't wait for her to ask. "I told her we can't keep talking outside of work," he said quietly. "I need to fix this, Claire. I miss us." She didn't answer right away. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle, and the smell of wet earth filled the room. "It's not enough to miss something," she said finally. "You have to choose it again. Every day." Daniel nodded. "Then I choose you." For the first time in weeks, his voice sounded certain. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. They sat together in silence, the sound of rain blending with the beating of two fragile hearts trying to find their rhythm again. Claire knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now, the truth was no longer hiding in the rain, and as the night settled over their quiet home, she made a quiet vow. If love could be lost in silence, maybe it could also be rebuilt with honesty. One word, one promise, one small act of care at a time. The days after the rain felt different in Claire's house. There was a quiet tension that lingered, but also a glimmer of hope. Daniel had kept his promise to distance himself from Olivia outside work. Yet Claire couldn't stop thinking about that delicate line they had crossed, the line that almost pulled them apart. She knew that rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and honesty. But she also understood that some truths needed to come from outside her own perspective. One bright morning, as Claire organized her designs in her home office, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Olivia standing there, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Her face was sincere, almost vulnerable. "Hi, Claire," she said softly. I wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't mean to interfere or cause you pain. Sometimes I forget how strong a marriage really is." Claire motioned for her to come in, unsure whether to feel anger or pity. Olivia's presence was tense but calm. She placed the flowers on the table and sat down. "I've seen how you two are together. Daniel talks about you constantly. Even when he's stressed, even when things at work get complicated, it's always about you. And I realized I was just a distraction, nothing more." Claire listened quietly. Her emotions were a swirl of relief and unease. "I appreciate your honesty," she said finally. "But this shouldn't have happened. Daniel and we've been married for years. We've shared everything. And yet, somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing me." Olivia nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm sorry. I've learned that sometimes people get lost in the moment, in attention or companionship, and forget what really matters. Daniel is lucky to have you." That afternoon, Olivia left, and Claire felt a strange lightness. She didn't forgive immediately, but there was no hostility, only clarity. She realized that the heart's mistakes often aren't about intention, but about neglect. When one person stops showing love, even unintentionally, others step in without meaning to. When Daniel returned home that evening, he was quiet, almost hesitant. Claire met him in the living room, her hands clasped. "We need to talk," she said. He nodded, sinking into the couch beside her. I know I hurt you, he said, his voice low but steady. I didn't see how far I was letting things go, and I didn't realize how much you were feeling invisible. I'm sorry. Claire's eyes softened. I know you didn't cross a line physically, Daniel, but emotionally, we almost lost each other. I don't want that to happen again. He took her hands in his, gripping them as if to anchor himself. It won't, I promise. You're the one I love. You're the one I've built this life with. I forgot that for a moment, but I remember now. I need you, all of you. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. She didn't speak, but the weight of those words settled in her chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. It wasn't a simple fix. Trust that had been shaken needed care. Not just words, but this was the start. The next few weeks were filled with small gestures that slowly rebuilt their bond. Daniel made time for Claire in ways he hadn't before. He left work early to share dinner, called just to say he was thinking of her, and even asked for her opinion on projects, not just as a courtesy, but as someone whose thoughts he genuinely valued. Claire, in turn, allowed herself to be vulnerable. She expressed her fears, her worries, and her hurt. Daniel listened, never interrupting, always acknowledging her feelings. The honesty between them became the bridge they had needed. And slowly they began to feel like partners again. Not just two people living under the same roof. One quiet evening, they sat together by the fireplace, a soft glow casting shadows across the room. Claire leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. I was scared, she admitted. I felt like you were slipping away, like I was losing you without even realizing it. Daniel hugged her tightly. I know, and I almost let that happen. But I'm here now, Claire. I'm choosing us every day. The vulnerability in that moment made everything feel real again. The fear, the tension, the almost heartbreak, all of it had been a test, and they were both willing to work through it. Claire realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about effort, commitment, and choosing to see the good even when things got messy. Weeks later, Claire ran into Olivia again, this time at the grocery store. Their eyes met, and Olivia smiled politely. I hope things are better, she said softly. Claire nodded. They are. Thank you. There was no awkwardness, no tension, only a quiet understanding. Olivia had accepted her role in the situation and stepped back gracefully. That moment felt like a small victory, a reminder that boundaries could be respected, and that honesty could heal wounds without bitterness. In the evenings that followed, Claire and Daniel began to reconnect in ways that were deeper than before. They shared stories of their past, laughed about memories they hadn't revisited in years, even planned small weekend trips just for the two of them. The routine of their lives no longer felt monotonous. It felt cherished. Every act, from a simple shared meal to a late-night conversation, was a reminder that they were rebuilding something stronger than before. One night, as they walked hand in hand along a quiet street lined with glowing streetlights, Daniel stopped and looked at Claire. I've learned something, he said softly. Love isn't just about being together when things are easy. It's about standing together when everything else tries to pull you apart. Claire squeezed his hand. I've learned that too. And I see now, even when someone else steps too close, it doesn't mean the heart belongs to them. It's a choice every day to stay, to trust, and to love. The rain started again, soft and gentle this time. They didn't run for cover. Instead, they let the droplets fall around them, feeling it wash away the tension of the past weeks. It was symbolic, a quiet cleansing that mirrored what had happened inside their hearts. By the time they returned home, they were laughing softly, the closeness they had feared lost, now restored. Sitting together in the living room, Claire thought about the journey, the fear, misunderstanding, the near heartbreak, and realized that it had made their love more resilient. It wasn't about perfection or avoidance of mistakes. It was about facing the hard truths, understanding each other's hearts, and choosing one another despite fear. From that night on, their marriage felt alive again. Daniel never forgot to show his appreciation, and Claire never let fear build walls between them. They had been tested, almost torn apart, but they emerged stronger, more aware. and more committed to nurturing the bond they had created years ago. And sometimes when Claire looked at Daniel, she felt a quiet gratitude for second chances, for honesty, and for the kind of love that could bend without breaking, that could face storms and still find its way back home. It was clear now that love was not about avoiding mistakes, but about making the right choices when the heart was challenged. And for Claire and Daniel, that choice was simple. They chose each other. Every day, rain or shine, with trust restored and hearts renewed.